Tonight's tale asks a simple question. What happens when the water won't boil and the messages won't stop? This is Teapot. As the dark clouds rolled in, I headed indoors to rest. I closed the door and dropped my wet jacket on the ground. I grabbed the teapot, put some water in, and placed it on the stove. I turned on the stove, and the flame sparked for a bit before it ignited. I sat down on my sofa and placed my phone down. Not even seconds after putting it down, I received a text message. I picked up the phone and saw that it was from somebody that I couldn't care less about, so I placed it back down. Then it happened again. I grabbed my phone with a sigh, thinking that it was the same damn person, but it wasn't. I looked at the text, puzzled for a second. It was from an unknown number. The thought of that scared me halfway to death. You know what you have to do. The words felt familiar somehow, like an echo from a conversation I'd tried to forget. I looked back at the stove to see if the tea was finished, but nothing. The water sat still, refusing to bubble. I looked back at my phone and laughed it off as I leaned my head against the sofa and drifted off. My phone went off again. I looked at the text and it said,
"Time's ticking, pal."
I got up from the sofa and started to walk around, from the kitchen to the living room, passing around the sofa. Something felt off about the apartment, like the angles were slightly wrong. I checked on the tea again and realized that it was still not boiling yet. Strange. It had been on for what felt like 20 minutes. I started thinking to myself, wondering where the hell these texts were coming from. I went over to the window inside my apartment and moved the blinds over to get a better look outside. I saw nothing but more dark clouds rolling in. Then it began. The rain started to pour in. I could hear the raindrops smacking against my roof. I closed the blinds, and right as I was going to sit down on my sofa, my phone went off again. The same text appeared. "Time's ticking, pal." The text made me angry. I started gritting my teeth and breathing heavily. The words felt like an accusation, like someone knew what I'd done, what I'd failed to do. I threw the phone back on the table and began angrily walking around my sofa. The thoughts started to get to me. Who the hell is this person? What do they want? Do they know about them? I tried to lay down and calm myself. I started to get cozy and began to slowly drift off again. As I was beginning to drift off, my phone went off again. I hesitantly reached over and grabbed it. I went to the messages and saw that it was from the person I had ignored in the first place. "Are you okay?" I smirked at the message and put my phone back down on the table. If only they knew how far from okay I was. I got up from the sofa to check on the tea, and it still had not come to a boil. The water remained eerily still, despite the flame licking the bottom of the pot. I sighed and then headed into the restroom. I looked into the mirror and saw a reflection of all my friends. I laughed to myself and said, "What friends?" As I turned on the water to my sink and began washing my face, I heard a cracking sound. I looked back up at the mirror. I saw that it was beginning to shatter. and I became puzzled at the sight of my mirror cracking. Fine lines spread across the surface like a web. I thought nothing of it and continued washing my face, wondering why the mirror was cracking. The more I had the water on, the more I kept hearing this cracking sound. I turned the water off and looked back at the mirror. It seemed to be perfectly fine. No cracks, no lines. Perfect. I laughed at the sight of the seemingly perfect mirror, shut off the light in the bathroom, and headed out to the living room, closing the bathroom door behind me. I looked into the kitchen and saw that the tea had still not boiled. I walked over to the sofa, but noticed that my wet jacket was on it. I glared at the jacket and said to myself, "How did you get there?" I thought nothing of it. My mind had been playing tricks lately. I grabbed the jacket to hang it back up. When I turned around, I saw my sofa turned completely to the opposite side from where it originally was. The coffee table had shifted too, 90 degrees from its original position. I became baffled at the sight of my couch, but ended up laughing it off as I lay back down on it. The laugh came out wrong, hollow. As I began to slowly fall asleep, I felt a vibration sensation on the lower part of my body and woke up to realize that my phone was on my pants, vibrating. How it had gotten there. I picked it up and saw that I was being called by an unknown number. I thought to myself, now they're calling? I answered the phone hesitantly and said, "Who are you?" I got no answer at all for almost a minute, just breathing. Then, "You know what you have to do." The voice sounded like mine, like an echo of my own thoughts. Before I could even reply, the phone cut off, and I knew the person had hung up on me. I sat up and got off my sofa with my phone in my hand, clinging to it as I began to walk around my apartment. I traveled into my bathroom again and saw that there was a crack in the mirror, just like before. This time I was certain. The crack ran right through where my face would be. I shook my head and closed the door again. I went back over to the stove and saw that the flame was still on, but the water was still not boiling. Hours now, and nothing. I became frustrated and opened my fridge to see what I had to eat. Not much, so I closed the fridge and turned around. The teapot was on the counter next to the kitchen sink. I stared at the teapot, confused, and put it back on the stove, laughing. The laugh sounded manic even to me. I went over to my living room and saw that the sofa had turned a complete 180 degrees, and so had the table. I laughed it off and sat back down on my sofa with my phone still in my hand. I looked at it with a bit of anger and confusion before putting it on the table. I lay back down, looking at my phone, wondering if someone was trying to kill me. Or maybe I was. I laughed that idea off and began to drift off again. I awakened to droppings hitting my face. My first thought was, my roof has a leak now because of the heavy rain. I decided to go up into the attic to check it out. With my flashlight in hand, I looked around and saw nothing. No leakage at all, and it baffled me. I turned off my flashlight and went back downstairs to investigate. There was a puddle of what looked like water, but it was dark, almost like ink. I went over to the sofa and examined the liquid substance. As I went to touch it, I felt a burning sensation and pulled away. I was shocked beyond belief. I went to the bathroom again to look in the mirror and saw that most of my face had burn marks. I was petrified at my own reflection, my eyes nearly popping out of their sockets. This time I couldn't laugh it off. Every time I went to touch the marks, they would disappear without a trace, and then come right back, as if they were never gone. I turned away from the mirror, exited the bathroom, and headed toward the sofa. When I came back, I froze. The bizarre dark liquid had disappeared, left no trace. I started grabbing and poking at the area where the pool of dark liquid had been, and yet it felt bone dry. I went over to the left side of my sofa where the dripping began and pushed against it to move the sofa from the center to the right side of my living room. Once I felt secure, I laid back down on the sofa and closed my eyes. With my eyes closed, I realized just how hilarious and cruel my life had become. I would laugh at people who told me how lucky they thought I was, how smart they thought I was. I believed I was just an average guy, nothing else, yet people kept telling me the same thing. There was nothing to show for it, besides all the multiple awards I ever won. They meant nothing to me but everything to everyone else. The only thing that actually meant something to me was someone I loved. I would say that I hated her, but she already knew what I was really saying. I thought it was hysterical at first, but then I started to feel the same way. I hated that feeling because it was real. I knew I would find some way to screw it up. I always did. I started to believe that I was insane for believing in something people called love. Being loved flabbergasted me, but rejection was worse somehow. Her presence scared me, but also made me feel comfort. Moronic as I was, I laughed it off. The days, the weeks, the years went by, and this feeling I ignored suddenly became stronger. She said something to me I'll never forget. After everything you've done, I always still came back to you. I threw it all away for meaningless encounters when I should have been with the one person who actually meant something. It's funny how you go through life and wonder if the people who critique you are the ones trying to help you. I smirked to myself and then drifted off. I awoke to pounding on my door and rolled off the sofa, hitting the ground. I opened the door and saw a suitcase. I went to check if anyone was around, but there was no one. Only a suitcase lying on the ground. The suitcase was red, with black lining where the steel was. Something about it felt familiar, like something I'd packed once and forgotten. I grabbed the suitcase and slid it against the table, nearly breaking it. I went over to check if the tea was done, and saw again that it had not come to a boil yet. Time had stopped for that water, or maybe for me. I grabbed the teapot with anger and wanted to throw it against the wall, but I laid it back down on the flame coming from the stovetop, and sat back down on my sofa again. I felt trapped inside this world we all live in, imprisoned by every human. My parents told me to have manners and be respectful. Then I questioned why I should. Was questioning things a horrible idea, or for the greater good? I tried to make everyone happy, but then I'd stop myself and think, why should I? I was still trying to learn that lesson, but never could. I always wanted to prove people wrong, and I was damn good at that. But maybe I shouldn't try to prove people wrong. Maybe I should just worry about myself. I felt like I had so much to prove to everyone that I ended up forgetting myself. It was hard to look at myself in the mirror because I didn't see anything special at all. Just another human on this planet we call Earth. Nothing less, nothing more. These negative thoughts slowly drifted away as I began to close my eyes and fall back to sleep. I awoke again to my phone going off. I grabbed it and looked at the phone with anger. The text read, "Why would you do this to me?" The words were mine. The words I never said to her. I threw the phone at the wall and watched it shatter, just the way my life had. I never thought much of anything I ever did. It always seemed to me that I could do better, but I didn't. I sat there, half-assed my way through everything life threw at me. Yet I still had this burning passion to be the best. I grew up getting what I wanted. Most people would say I was spoiled. I could partially agree with them, but I always had in the back of my mind that I wanted to earn what I wanted. I was spoiled, yet I never looked down upon people. In my mind, I came to this conclusion. I could have all the money in the world and everything I wanted, but there would always be something missing. I reached a certain amount of money, and that's when I started to ask myself, do I really need all of this? I laid my head back and fell back to sleep. I awoke to the tea whistling on the stove. Finally, after all this time. I went over to the stove and went to pour some tea into my cup, but the tea started to flood the ground below me. I looked under the cup and saw that it was normal. I poured the tea again into the cup, and again the tea flowed onto the ground. I became frustrated and went to pour the tea into my cup, watching as it again dripped onto the ground. The tea wouldn't be contained. It refused to be held. I threw the teapot against the wall and smashed the cup on the ground. I started breathing heavily and frantically pacing around the table, near the couch, and back into the kitchen. I stared down into the pool of tea, flustered and confused. I kneeled down and began sobbing. My life started flashing through my eyes. Losing the love of my life. Losing everything I didn't care about at the time. And now realizing what I had. What I'd lost. I lay on the ground in the fetal position, still sobbing. I considered going back and trying to fix what I had destroyed, but my selfishness and neglect would not allow me to do so. As I lay there on the ground, I came to grips with what I have now, or what's left. An empty apartment, an empty soul, lost inside a teapot. And there we leave them. On the floor of an apartment that may or may not exist, with tea that will not be contained, and regrets that will not be silenced. Check your mirrors tonight. Watch your furniture. And if your tea won't boil, perhaps it's trying to tell you something. This has been Teapot on Incog Stories. Sometimes the real horror isn't what haunts us. It's what we've done to deserve it. Special thanks to curvproductions and Exorcised Sun for the artwork in this video. Their links will be down below in the description. Check them out and show some support. Like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. Until next time, stay in the shadows.